Imagine standing deep inside a pitch-black cave. Your torch flickers against walls etched with strange lines and spirals, symbols thousands of years old. They're not random, they're maps, but not of places we know. These may be the earliest charts of the underworld. Long before ancient Egypt or Greece described realms of the dead, prehistoric people from Europe to Mesoamerica were already sketching out the architecture of the afterlife. Across continents, cave systems, burial chambers, and petroglyphs seem to share eerie similarities, as if all pointing to the same invisible world beneath our feet. But what if these weren't just spiritual metaphors or tribal myths? What if early humans truly believed in and mapped out a physical underworld, a vast and terrifying mirror realm where the dead journeyed through trials and thresholds? Today, archaeologists are discovering clues hidden in the oldest caves, aligned tombs, and sacred landscapes, hints that our ancestors might have navigated the afterlife not through faith alone, but with directions. In this documentary, we'll dive into the oldest mysteries of humanity. Why did so many ancient burial sites mimic labyrinths? What do ancient cave markings have in common with modern maps? And could the myths of Hades, Duat, and Xibalba all be distorted memories of one primal map? Somewhere in the silence of stone, the ancients left a message, a chart, a path, maybe even a warning. And tonight, we'll follow it. Because perhaps the dead didn't just vanish, perhaps they left a trail. Caves have always fascinated and frightened us. They are the Earth's hidden arteries, cold, silent, eternal. To the prehistoric mind, they weren't just shelters, they were thresholds, portals, mouths to a world beyond. In France, the Chauvet and Lascaux caves contain more than just animal depictions. Among the horses and bulls are spirals, lattices, and abstract shapes, geometries carved in darkness. Some archaeologists call them entoptic forms, patterns seen in altered states, but others suggest something more tangible, maps. These caves often stretch in winding paths, descending deeper into the earth. In some, like Spain's El Castillo, red discs are painted in progressive sequences, as if guiding someone downward. And in others, such as the Cosca Cave, the walls almost mimic a trail, each turn marked with new symbols, like a prehistoric GPS. But here's the mystery. Why go through such danger? Some caves were clearly not living spaces. They're claustrophobic, difficult to access, and filled with deadly gases. Yet early humans returned again and again. Why? The answer might lie in belief. In many shamanic traditions, the underworld is not hell. It is a sacred space of transformation, a realm where the soul journeys, meets ancestral guides, and returns with wisdom, or not at all. This belief persists globally. The ancient Greeks believed entrances to Hades lay in caves, like the Necromanteion of Ephyra. The Maya charted Xibalba through cenotes, water-filled caves believed to connect to the spirit world, and the Egyptians believed the Duat was an underground maze, complete with gates, guardians, and rivers of fire. Could these caves be the original maps of those underworlds? Were the ancient artists marking spirit routes, navigation guides for souls of the dead? And even stranger, many of these cave systems align astronomically. In Chauvet, certain animal depictions match star constellations as they appeared 30,000 years ago. Could the caves be dual maps, both of the sky above and the world below? It's a haunting thought, that beneath our feet lies a mirrored cosmos, traced in blood, ochre, and soot. As we emerge from the painted shadows of prehistoric caves, we now descend into another kind of darkness, man-made this time. Across the world, beneath some of the most iconic tombs and temples, lie networks of tunnels, chambers, and corridors whose purpose has long been debated. Were these simply burial vaults, or something far older, part of a ritualized journey into the underworld? Take Egypt's Serapeum of Saqqara, an underground necropolis buried deep beneath the desert sands. Their massive stone sarcophagi, some weighing over 70 tons, are lined up like sleeping monoliths in long, symmetrical galleries. They were designed with precision, yet the human remains inside are sparse or missing altogether. Why go to such lengths to house the dead, or to keep them contained? In Peru, beneath the ancient city of Cusco, lies a network of tunnels said to connect the Sacsayhuaman fortress to other sacred sites miles away. Locals tell stories of children entering these tunnels and never returning. Some believe they were escape routes. Others think they were pilgrimage paths to the land of the ancestors, buried like veins beneath the surface of the earth. Even in Europe, we find eerie symmetry. The Hypogeum of Halsaflieni in Malta, dating back over 6,000 years, is a multi-layered underground temple carved with meticulous care. One chamber, the Oracle Room, has such powerful acoustic properties that a chant whispered inside vibrates through the entire structure. What kind of rituals were performed here? Could these sounds have been meant to guide the soul or confuse intruding spirits? Many of these underground tombs and catacombs mimic myths, where death was not an end but a passage through mazes, rivers and fire. The ancient Egyptians called it the Duat. In Mesopotamia, it was Kur. For the Norse, it was hell, and often these places were imagined not above or beside, but beneath the earth, accessible only through descent. Could it be that these labyrinths beneath tombs weren't for the bodies of the dead, but for their souls? That the journey through dark corridors mirrored a spiritual map, one the living could walk and the dead could follow? There's an eerie commonality to their construction. Sharp turns to confuse spirits, narrow squeezes forcing one to crawl, and sudden drops that challenge the traveller's courage. These aren't just passages, they're tests, purification gauntlets, possibly even simulations of what the dead were thought to endure. But here's the most curious part. These labyrinths were often hidden, not marked, not meant to be explored by just anyone. They were sealed, forgotten, and only rediscovered centuries later. Maybe they were never meant to be understood with logic. Maybe they were meant to be felt with fear, awe, and reverence. Across the dry plains of Peru, etched into the earth with unsettling precision, lie the Nazca lines, geoglyphs so vast they can only be truly appreciated from the sky. These massive, mysterious shapes, monkeys, hummingbirds, straight lines stretching for miles, have puzzled researchers for decades. Were they ceremonial pathways, astronomical calendars, or something else entirely, maps for souls, guiding the dead across a symbolic terrain toward the afterlife? Far from being isolated to Peru, similar linear constructs appear around the world. In the windswept fields of Brittany, France, thousands of granite megaliths known as the Karnak stones stand in long, deliberate rows, forming lines that stretch hundreds of meters. Unlike settlements or fortifications, these stone arrangements serve no obvious practical purpose. But their orientation is far from random. Some align with sunrise at solstice, others point to distant burial mounds or terminate at sources of water. The stones, it seems, were telling a story, a silent map carved in rock. Anthropologists have noted a curious pattern. The oldest of these alignments often follow a directional logic. In many cases, they trace a westward path, corresponding with ancient beliefs that the soul journeyed toward the setting sun after death. In cultures from the Celts to the Egyptians, west was the gateway to the next world. Could these stone rows have served as literal spirit paths, an initiatory route for the dead to follow, guiding them through the liminal zone between life and whatever lies beyond? Recent satellite imaging and LiDAR scans have added new dimensions to the mystery. Beneath layers of soil and vegetation, forgotten rows of stones, ditches and embankments have emerged in Britain, Ireland and even sub-Saharan Africa, many bearing the same directional cues. When plotted, they form patterns reminiscent of processional routes or even circuit diagrams, visual metaphors for the spiritual journey. Some of the most fascinating evidence comes from lesser-known desert cultures. In southern Jordan, long lines of stone known as desert kites were once assumed to be hunting traps, but newer interpretations suggest ceremonial functions. These structures sometimes lead to cairns, burial markers. Some archaeologists now propose that they formed ritual landscapes, their paths meant to be followed not by game, but by ghostly travellers. Indigenous oral traditions echo these ideas. Among Australia's Aboriginal peoples, song lines describe invisible paths across the land, encoded in stories, chants and landmarks. While not always marked with stone, these routes align with sacred geography and are often used in funerary contexts. Could prehistoric stone alignments be their analogue? A sacred map, both practical and metaphysical, guiding both feet and spirit across the terrain. The consistency of these directional layouts, especially in pre-literate cultures separated by oceans, defies coincidence. Whether it's stone lines in Europe, geoglyphs in South America, or spirit paths in Africa, something unites them, an attempt to chart the invisible. These weren't roads for the living, they were maps for the dead. In the next scene, we'll explore what symbols early humans carved along these paths. Mysterious spirals, double axes, and human-animal hybrids, messages encoded in stone that might hold the key to how prehistoric societies visualized the underworld itself. As ancient peoples mapped the sacred in lines and landscapes, they also engraved their myths into stone. Symbols, timeless, enigmatic, cover cave walls, dolmens, and tombs across the globe. Many of these carvings resist interpretation. They are not literal scenes but codes, glimpses into a symbolic language now half forgotten. To understand the maps of the dead, we must learn to read these signs of the underworld. Take the spiral, for instance. Found from the Iberian Peninsula to Korea, the spiral is one of the oldest and most persistent symbols in prehistoric art. At Newgrange in Ireland, massive entrance stones are carved with triple spirals, an unbroken flow of motion, as if to guide the soul through a portal. Spirals are frequently located near passage graves, aligned with the rising sun at winter solstice. Were they more than decoration? Were they keys, spinning maps pointing the way from this world into the next? Another recurring image, hybrid figures, part human, part beast. In the rock art of Valcamonica, dating back 10,000 years, figures appear with antlers, wings, or exaggerated eyes. Shamanic in appearance, these beings seem to act as guides or gatekeepers, bridging two worlds. Across cultures, the belief in psychopomps, spirit guides who escort the dead, is nearly universal. Could these carvings have marked stations along a soul's journey, where aid or warning awaited? We also find carved axes, often double-headed, the labris, especially in Minoan tombs and Iberian stelae. Though the labris was later mythologized in the story of the Minotaur, its origin may be far older. Some believe it represents the thunder of deities, others a bifurcated path, one head for life, one for death. Positioned near burial sites, they may indicate a decision point, a moment of spiritual crossing. Even more curious are the so-called solar boats found carved into rock in Scandinavia, Egypt, and Central Asia. These boats do not appear functional. They float not on water, but in symbolic space. Often manned by a row of anonymous figures, the boat becomes a chariot of the dead, a vessel to ferry souls into the night sky or deep earth. Inside Paleolithic burial chambers, red ochre, symbolizing blood or rebirth, coats skeletons and walls. Eyes are painted on sarcophagi. Some tombs feature schematic maps, zones of stars, animals, or mazes that do not reflect daily life but a mythic cartography, the way through death's unknown terrain, a journey not just downward but inward. One might ask, were these symbols a shared language across time, or were they dreams etched in stone, attempts to express what could never be fully understood? Even now, archaeologists debate their meanings. Are they mere art or ritual diagrams? Sacred instructions for passage into the next world? Some modern theories suggest these symbols are archetypal, products of altered states of consciousness. The work of anthropologist David Lewis Williams, for example, ties many prehistoric symbols to visions seen in trance states. Spirals, tunnels, grids, and all common in shamanic journeys. Perhaps what we're seeing carved into these ancient rocks is not just memory, but experience, a direct transcription of inner worlds. These symbols then aren't random. They are pieces of a larger map, a spiritual schematic that may have guided the dead across a symbolic landscape, much like coordinates on an invisible grid. In the next scene, we'll examine burial architecture itself, not just tombs as resting places, but as carefully constructed replicas of a mythic underworld, multi-chambered mazes, false doors, and acoustic chambers built to echo the cries of the beyond. To many ancient societies, the tomb was more than a resting place. It was a machine for the soul, a vessel that didn't merely contain the dead, but helped transport them. In nearly every corner of the prehistoric world, we find burial chambers that double as symbolic underworlds, sacred architecture built to replicate and perhaps activate the journey into death. One striking example lies in the Orkney Islands of Scotland. At Maeshowe, a Neolithic passage tomb over 5,000 years old, a long stone corridor leads into a dark inner chamber. On the winter solstice, the setting sun shines perfectly through the passage, illuminating the rear wall. For a brief moment, light enters the land of the dead. It's as if the sun itself descends into the underworld, guiding the souls toward rebirth. This phenomenon isn't isolated. In Ireland's Newgrange, in Malta's Menadra temples, even in Egyptian pyramids, we see the same concept. Tightly controlled light shafts, symbolic directions, hidden doors, and vertical or spiral paths. These alignments weren't accidental. They were astronomical scripts written into stone, timed to the heavens. The tombs became calendars of eternity. In ancient Egypt, tombs took the form of a labyrinthine cosmos. The walls were inscribed with texts like the Amduat and the Book of Gates, mapping the soul's nightly voyage with explicit instructions. The deeper one went, the darker and more complex the path. Side chambers symbolized trials. False doors were built into walls, gateways for the Ka or soul to exit and return. These doors were not meant to open physically but metaphysically, passages only the dead could walk through. But perhaps the most haunting tombs are those that whisper. Deep within the Maltese hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, a subterranean burial temple dating back to 4000 BCE, lies the so-called Oracle Chamber. A carved niche resonates sound in eerie ways. If one speaks into it at a specific pitch, the whole room vibrates. The effect is disorienting, meditative. It's believed these acoustics played a role in rituals, altering consciousness, thinning the veil between life and death. The hypogeum isn't just a tomb, it's an experience, a portal voiced in stone. Architectural features like descending tunnels, narrow corridors, and chambered layers recur across cultures. From Etruscan necropolis in Italy to Shavan temples in Peru, the underworld was imagined as a place below, inside, layered and guarded. The tombs mimic this path, forcing the living to descend, to crouch, to lose their bearings, just as the soul must in death. Even in the Americas, the concept survives. In the ancient city of Teotihuacan, a tunnel beneath the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent leads to a chamber lined with pools of liquid mercury and glittering pyrite, materials believed to symbolize the reflective, shimmering rivers of the afterlife. It's not a tomb in the traditional sense, but it echoes the same idea: descent into another realm, guided by light, sound, and symbol. Why such obsession with architectural precision? Why build complex passageways instead of simple graves? Because these spaces weren't just containers for bodies, they were containers for stories the dead had to live one last time. The journey into death wasn't passive, it required movement, decision, transformation, and the architecture served as a kind of spiritual guide, a map in 3 dimensions. In the next scene, we'll look at how these ideas extended beyond the tombs into sacred landscapes, entire valleys, rivers, and mountains encoded with funerary meaning, where the terrain itself acted as a living map of the afterlife. Death didn't just belong to the tomb. For many prehistoric and ancient cultures, it was written into the land itself. Rivers became thresholds, mountains stood as beacons, valleys transformed into corridors of transformation. What if the ancients saw the earth not as a setting for burial, but as a living map of the underworld? Let's begin with the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, a necropolis for pharaohs and nobles carved into the Theban cliffs. At first glance, it seems remote, hidden, but its location is anything but accidental. The valley lies directly opposite the Temple of Karnak across the Nile, mirroring the sun's daily path from east to west, life to death. The pyramidal peak of Al-Quran looms above, naturally shaped like a guardian pyramid, pointing to the heavens. This valley wasn't just a burial ground, It was a cosmic replica of the journey the soul would take each night through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Across the Atlantic, the city of Teotihuacan in central Mexico tells a similar story. Its grand avenue of the dead runs north-south, lined with pyramids and platforms. But zoom out, and a deeper geometry emerges. The city's layout mirrors celestial alignments: Orion's belt, the Pleiades, solar zeniths. The pyramid of the sun, when observed at specific times of year, aligns with the path of the Milky Way, the celestial river believed by Mesoamericans to carry souls into the afterlife. Even underground, a tunnel beneath the Pyramid of the Moon contains carved miniature landscapes and pools of mercury, perhaps a literal map of the underworld made to be walked in ritual. Mountains too played a sacred role in many ancient cosmologies. In Turkey, Mount Nemrut stands as a silent sentinel to the dead. In the 1st century BCE, King Antiochus I had massive stone statues erected atop its summit. Gods, ancestors himself, facing the rising and setting sun. The mountain became a fusion of sky and stone, time and eternity. Burial wasn't underground, it was elevation, placing the dead among the gods. The Inca developed perhaps the most intricate example. From their capital, Cusco, radiated dozens of imaginary lines known as sects, connecting temples, springs and shrines over miles. These weren't random paths, they mirrored the spine of the cosmos. Some were associated with death rituals, others with star positions or mythic events. The entire landscape became sacred architecture. Death had no single location. It was a network, a web, a story written across rivers, hills and trails. In prehistoric Britain, stone circles like Avebury and burial mounds like West Kennet Longbarrow appear connected through geographic lines, long paths called leys. While the term ley lines is now associated with pseudoscience, some alignments are real. These routes may have symbolized ritual journeys, from life to death, from settlement to tomb, from the world of the living to the realm of ancestors. Even water played a critical role. In many ancient mythologies, crossing water signified the crossing into death. The Styx in Greek lore, the Ganges in Hindu belief, and Nile journeys in Egyptian funerary rites. Some burial sites are deliberately located near springs, lakes or rivers. Could these bodies of water have served as symbolic thresholds? The question arises, were ancient people mapping the afterlife onto the world, or were they reading the world as already sacred? We'll never fully know. But what's clear is that for prehistoric cultures, the boundaries between the living and the dead were not fixed. They were written into the earth, guided by stars, and travelled with every funeral. In our next scene, we'll dive deeper into these cosmic connections, examining how the heavens themselves acted as guides, calendars, and maps for navigating the ultimate mystery. Before GPS, before paper maps, the ancients looked up. The night sky was more than a canvas of stars. It was a compass, a calendar, and a cosmic mirror. In the prehistoric imagination, the heavens held answers about death, time, and destiny. Could it be that our ancestors not only worshipped the stars, but also mapped their final journey through them? Across continents and cultures, certain constellations recur in myths of the dead. Take Orion, for instance. In Egypt, the stars of Orion were associated with Osiris, the god of the underworld. The 3 pyramids of Giza, built over 4,500 years ago, are aligned in a pattern that many scholars and independent researchers say mirrors Orion's belt. The theory, called the Orion correlation theory, suggests that these monumental tombs weren't just architectural feats, they were anchors, grounding the soul's celestial ascent. Further south, at Nabta Playa, a Neolithic site in Egypt's desert, massive stones erected 6,000 years ago form alignments with the summer solstice and Orion's rising. This site predates Stonehenge by millennia, suggesting an early link between star patterns and death rites. The journey of the soul, it seems, was literally written in the stars. In Mesoamerica, the Milky Way was seen as a great celestial river, much like the Nile, and the place where souls travelled after death. At sites like Teotihuacan and Chichen Itza, Temples and pyramids were positioned to align with equinox sunrises and zenith passages, but also with key stars and celestial events. The night sky was not for idle wonder, it was a detailed map of existence beyond the grave. In northern Europe, burial chambers like Newgrange in Ireland reveal an astonishing understanding of solar cycles. Every winter solstice, sunlight enters the passage and illuminates the inner chamber, a brief spark of life in the darkest season. These solar rituals were not just agricultural, they symbolized death, rebirth, and the soul's return from the underworld. Even more intriguing is the Nebra sky disk, discovered in Germany and dated to 1600 BCE. This bronze artifact shows a stylized sun, moon, and stars, possibly the earliest known representation of the cosmos in human hands. Could it have been a kind of funerary guide, a portable map for navigating the great beyond? All of these point to a simple yet profound truth. Prehistoric people were astronomers of the soul. They watched the skies not only to know when to plant crops or hold festivals, but to understand what came after death. They saw the stars as eternal, and perhaps they believed that if their tombs and cities aligned with these eternal patterns, the dead would find safe passage, repeating the cosmic cycle of night and day, life and death. Imagine a priest or a shaman watching the same stars we see today, tracing a path across the heavens, whispering to the dead, "Follow this light, it knows the way." In the next scene, we'll turn inward, into the cave temples and subterranean sanctuaries where these beliefs were etched into stone and darkness. As the ancients charted the heavens for signs of the soul's fate, they also turned inward, to the depths of the earth itself. Caves, tunnels, and labyrinths weren't just natural shelters, they were sacred gateways, entrances to the invisible, portals to the underworld. In many ancient belief systems, descending into the earth was a symbolic mirror of death, the womb of the world. From the pitch-black chambers of European cave systems to the buried shrines of the ancient East, early humans created elaborate rites not in the open, but hidden in darkness. Take the Lascaux caves in France, painted some 17,000 years ago. These aren't simple animal sketches. Deep within, far from light, are complex symbols, dots, abstract patterns, and human-animal hybrids. Were these markings a kind of proto-script? A record of shamanic visions? Or perhaps a map, not of geography, but of the spiritual journey into death and rebirth? In Malta, we find the Hypogeum of Halsaflieni, carved over 5,000 years ago. It's a 3-level underground temple with circular chambers that echo with unnatural resonance. One room, the so-called oracle chamber, produces amplified sound vibrations, leading some researchers to speculate it was used for trance rituals or spirit communication. If this site is a temple of the dead, it suggests a sophisticated psychological and acoustic architecture for guiding the soul, or contacting it. Farther east in India, the Ajanta caves fuse Buddhist philosophy with subterranean ritual. Cut into cliffs, these temples draw one deeper and deeper toward inner sanctums where light barely reaches. For Buddhists, the cave journey represents withdrawal from the material world, dying before death in a spiritual sense, a trial of darkness before enlightenment. Even Greek myths reflect this motif. Heroes like Orpheus, Theseus, and Persephone all venture into the underworld through caves or hidden paths, only to emerge transformed. In ancient Minoan Crete, labyrinths were not mere mazes. They were metaphors for spiritual rebirth, often with a monstrous guardian at the center. Was it a metaphor for conquering fear, or for the internal struggle at the moment of death? This idea repeats in Mesoamerican cultures too. The Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Maya, speaks of Xibalba, the underworld entered through cave systems. In modern Guatemala, caves are still seen as sacred thresholds where people perform offerings for rain, fertility, and protection from evil spirits. Some scientists argue that cave rituals were early forms of neurotheology, creating sensory deprivation to trigger spiritual visions. No light, echoes, deep silence. In such a space, it's easy to imagine yourself between worlds. Perhaps the cave wasn't a tomb at all, but a womb, a place to be remade. When we enter these ancient sanctuaries, we're not just descending into stone, we're stepping into the psychology of early humanity, a map not drawn in ink but in ritual, fear and hope. These spaces still evoke a kind of sacred silence, a hush that says, "This is not your world, tread carefully." Long before paper, before stone tablets or etched scripts, there was another kind of text, one too vast to hold in the hand, but written all around us, the land itself. To many prehistoric and early societies, geography was not inert. It was alive, sacred, shaped by divine will. Every bend in a river, every shadow cast by a mountain held meaning. These were not just natural features, they were spiritual coordinates, markers in a cosmic topography that charted the journey of the soul. Let's start with rivers. In ancient Egypt, the Nile wasn't just a waterway, it was a celestial road. Flowing from south to north, it echoed the mythological path of the sun god Ra through the underworld during the night. Pharaohs were buried on the west bank, symbolizing the land of the dead, while life unfolded on the east bank where the sun rose. Tombs, temples, and entire necropolises were aligned to this spiritual geography. The Ganges in India was, and still is, considered a goddess. Hindus believe that bathing in its waters purifies the soul, and that cremation ashes scattered here speed one's journey toward moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The river isn't just sacred, it's a pathway to transcendence. In Mesopotamia, the Tigris and Euphrates cradled not just agriculture, but cosmology. Some scholars argue that ancient texts describing the rivers of paradise may reflect real-world geography idealized into myth. The rivers weren't just life-givers, they were boundaries between realms. Mountains, too, played a profound role. The Greeks imagined the gods dwelling atop Mount Olympus, distant and eternal. For the Inca, Machu Picchu and other sacred sites were deliberately built to echo the shape and orientation of surrounding peaks. Mountains were more than majestic. They were thrones, stairways, sentinels of divine presence. In Tibet, Mount Kailash is so sacred that pilgrims walk its circumference in reverence, but no one climbs it. Why? Because it's believed to be the physical embodiment of Mount Meru, the axis mundi, the spiritual center of the universe in Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist cosmology. Even deserts were not voids, they were thresholds. In Egyptian belief, the desert west of the Nile was the realm of the dead. Souls had to traverse it in peril, facing demons and guardians, before reaching the field of reeds, their paradise. The Book of the Dead is, in many ways, a travel guide through this spiritual wilderness. Ancient funeral processions often followed paths that mimicked these mythic journeys. In some Andean cultures, corpses were carried uphill to align with the sun's path, symbolizing ascension. In others, they were buried along river bends thought to carry their spirit toward ancestral lands. And then there's alignment, the precision with which ancient peoples built monuments to mirror the heavens and the earth. The pyramids of Giza aligned with Orion's belt, Stonehenge marking solstices, Teotihuacan aligned with the setting of the Pleiades. These weren't just architectural marvels, they were part of a land script, an ongoing ritual inscribed on the face of the earth. But what if these alignments weren't only about the sky above? What if they were also mapping the world below, the underworld? Could rivers, deserts, and peaks have been used to chart not only how to live, but how to die well? In many cultures, the path to the afterlife wasn't metaphor, it was mappable. A river to cross, a mountain to climb, a wasteland to survive. Perhaps early humans saw no difference between physical and spiritual terrain. Life itself was a pilgrimage, and the land was the scroll on which it was written. Next scene, we descend into megalithic realms, stone circles, tombs, and alignments, asking, were they part of this great mapping system? Were they markers left behind for others to follow the trail into eternity? What if the stones weren't just memorials, but directions? Across the ancient world, from the windswept moors of Scotland to the misty hills of Brittany, from the green fields of Ireland to the basalt plateaus of Ethiopia, ancient builders erected massive stones in circles, lines, and spirals. For centuries, these have been treated as places of ritual, burial, or early astronomy. But a new interpretation is emerging, one that suggests these stones were also maps, not for travel across the Earth, but through the afterlife. Take Stonehenge. Its inner horseshoe and outer ring align with solstice sunrises and moon cycles, yes, but why such precise astronomical calibration in a site surrounded by dozens of burial mounds? Was this just an observatory, or a guide? Could the light streaming through the stones have marked key moments in a soul's journey? Move north to Callanish on the Isle of Lewis. Here, a stone cruciform radiates out from a central circle, like a compass rose made of granite. And the stones aren't randomly placed. Many align with lunar standstills, the rare cycles of the moon that only repeat every 18.6 years. If the moon was a guide for the dead, as many myths suggest, were these stones waypoints? A literal lunar map etched in megaliths? And then there's Newgrange in Ireland, a passage tomb older than the pyramids. Once a year during the winter solstice, a shaft of sunlight pierces the stone corridor and illuminates the burial chamber within. Light enters death. Life penetrates the tomb. A soul perhaps finds its way home. The entire design speaks of directionality, of a route, marked not in ink but in stone and sunbeam. Some archaeologists have begun to map these sites on a grander scale. They've noticed something odd. Megalithic monuments across Europe seem to fall along long straight paths, dubbed ley lines. Dismissed for decades as pseudo-science, ley lines are now being re-examined with new satellite and geomagnetic data. Could it be that prehistoric societies laid out not just towns and farms, but grids for the soul? It's not just a Western phenomenon. In Ethiopia, the massive Tia stones, each carved with mysterious swords and symbols, dot the highlands in long trails, many leading towards sacred rivers or mountains. No one knows who built them, but they are aligned, repeating, pointing. Consider too the Muisca of Colombia, whose roads of the dead were lined with stones and led from lake to mountaintop. Or the Aboriginal songlines of Australia, where landscape features and song verses combine to chart both physical and spiritual travel. The earth wasn't background, it was a manuscript, a sacred GPS, and stone was the pen. Why stone? Because it lasts. Because unlike bark or bone, it resists time, and perhaps because these were messages not meant for the living. They were left for the soul, for the gods, or for some future people, us, who might one day read their intent. There's a compelling hypothesis that some stone circles weren't just aligned to celestial events, but to nearby tombs, caves, or water sources. A sacred triangulation, light from above, death below, and water, symbol of rebirth beside. Could such a design have acted as a template for resurrection? A physical model of the afterlife route? When we look at the scale, effort, and precision with which these monuments were built, we have to ask, were these really just communal ritual centers? Or were they something more complex? Maps of consciousness, stone frameworks that encoded myth, astronomy, geography, and death. In modern times, we rely on satellites and compasses to tell us where we are. But our ancestors, it seems, looked to stones and stars, rivers and hills, and constructed maps you walk, not read. They weren't navigating countries, they were charting eternity. Next scene, we'll go underground, to explore whether caves and catacombs were more than just hiding places for the dead. Could they be portals into another realm entirely? What lies beneath? In nearly every ancient belief system, the underworld isn't just metaphorical, it has a physical location, a direction, a descent, and more often than not, that path begins in a cave. To prehistoric people, caves were the womb of the earth, dark, deep, and unknowable. A place where the sun disappeared and strange forces dwelled. The Chauvet Cave in France, adorned with 30,000-year-old paintings, isn't just an art gallery. It's a sanctuary, an echo chamber. And some archaeologists believe its narrow corridors and animal iconography represent a journey through different spiritual states, from life to death to rebirth. But it's not just Europe. In Mesoamerican cosmology, caves were portals. The Maya believed the cenotes, natural sinkholes leading into vast underground rivers, were sacred entrances to Xibalba, the Underworld. Offerings, sometimes including human remains, have been found deep within these cave systems. These were not simply places of burial, they were gateways. Even in ancient Egypt, where the focus is often on pyramids and temples above ground, key funerary texts like the Amduat describe the soul's journey through 12 caverns of the Duat, the hidden world beneath the earth. It wasn't just a dream. The layout of tombs in the Valley of the Kings mimicked this descent, and each chamber marked a stage in the transformation of the soul. In early Christianity, persecuted believers buried their dead and sometimes held clandestine services in the catacombs of Rome. But why underground, beyond necessity? Because the earth below was sacred. It was the final veil, and walking through those dimly lit tunnels lined with bones and frescoes of saints mirrored the path toward divine resurrection. Interestingly, this belief in subterranean transformation isn't limited to the West. In Siberian shamanism, cave rituals were used to induce altered states. The darkness wasn't feared, it was essential, a medium between the worlds. Some shamans believed they were literally climbing down the spine of the earth into the land of spirits and ancestors. And then there's the remarkable discovery in Turkey, Derinkuyu, an underground city carved deep into volcanic rock. Capable of sheltering tens of thousands, it features ventilation shafts, hidden doors, and communal rooms. While often explained as a wartime refuge, some suggest it had religious or initiatory purposes. Could these spaces have doubled as training grounds for spiritual rebirth, a controlled descent into symbolic death? It's also worth asking, why did so many underground spaces mimic the womb? Narrow entrances, expanding chambers, echoing heartbeats of dripping water. These were not just tombs, they were portals of transformation, spaces where the soul could be broken, reassembled and reborn. The choice to go underground wasn't arbitrary. To descend is to shed light, comfort, identity. The further in, the less you belong to the world above. And that's precisely the point. Ancient people may have believed that only by entering the earth's body could one leave behind the illusions of life and prepare for the soul's real journey. Modern explorers of these spaces often describe eerie silences, shifting air currents, and a sense of presence. Whether psychological or spiritual, the cave still speaks. It challenges you. It mirrors the mind. Next, we'll explore one of the strangest pieces of evidence yet: prehistoric skull alignments and burial maps that might represent literal diagrams of the soul's travel. Are we looking at ancient user manuals for death? Buried bones don't just tell us who died, they may reveal what the dead were believed to become. In the hidden corners of the archaeological record, patterns begin to emerge. Skull circles, linear arrangements of femurs, clusters of bones that defy randomness. These aren't just burial rituals, they might be maps. Let's begin with one of the oldest cities on Earth, Jericho. Excavations have revealed skulls separated from their bodies and placed in niches, sometimes with shells for eyes and plastered faces. Some are aligned to face the rising sun, others are grouped in tight formations. Were these heads symbolic anchors? Or directional guides, sentinels for the soul's journey? In Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists found evidence of deliberate skull modification, perforated crania, grooves carved with sharp tools, and carefully placed remains near T-shaped monoliths. These monoliths, many argue, could represent deities or spiritual gateways. Could the modified skulls represent ritual markers, not of death, but of passage? Meanwhile, in Neolithic Europe, particularly at sites like Çatalhöyük and Dolny Vestonica, graves show signs of ritualized placement. Bones oriented east-west. Skulls turn toward painted walls. Some researchers propose that these placements were symbolic instructions, routes for the deceased through an invisible realm. And this brings us to a haunting theory. What if early societies mapped the underworld using the dead themselves? Consider this. If your cosmology lacked writing, if your understanding of death relied on repetition and ritual, then bones, carefully arranged, become diagrams. A circle of skulls could represent the cycle of rebirth. A line could trace the sun's descent into night, or a path through the netherworld. Across northern Australia, Aboriginal burial mounds contain bones arranged in star-like patterns, often matching constellations associated with the Dreamtime, a spiritual realm connected with the afterlife. These may be the oldest forms of celestial navigation, guiding not ships but souls. It's not just bones either. Cave walls in France, Spain, and even Indonesia contain labyrinthine patterns, carved or painted spirals, mazes, and lines. For decades, these were considered decorative or meaningless, but when overlaid with the orientation of burials in the same caves, some of these doodles match burial paths. Could these be the first atlases of the afterlife? A more controversial idea comes from Anatolia. Researchers studying prehistoric mass graves noted that the arrangement of bodies mimicked the layout of local river systems. Were the dead being aligned with real-world geography? Or was it symbolic, a way to help the soul flow through the land and into the next world? This notion of the dead becoming part of a navigational language isn't confined to the ancient past. In medieval cathedrals, floor tiles sometimes contain spirals and mazes, like the famous Chartres labyrinth, intended to symbolize the pilgrimage of the soul. In these sacred spaces, space itself becomes a message. What's most astonishing is that these burial alignments appear independently across cultures separated by oceans and centuries. From pre-Columbian America to megalithic Britain, from Egypt to Indonesia, humans everywhere place their dead with intention, often along axes aligned with stars, mountains, or sacred rivers. But why? Was it a way to ensure rebirth, a spiritual GPS, or a final offering of meaning to a cosmos that rarely offers clarity? In the end, these maps may not have been made to be understood by the living. They may have been spoken in the language of death, intended only for those crossing over. In the next scene, we'll look at the world beneath the world, the myths, tunnels, and ancient texts that describe actual routes through the underworld, from the Egyptian Duat to the Greek Hades. Were these literary metaphors, or do they preserve memories of real-world journeys once undertaken by shamans, priests, or kings? Let's descend even deeper. The oldest maps of the underworld aren't etched in stone or traced in the soil. They're narrated in myth, inked in scrolls, carved on tomb walls. But what if these stories were more than metaphors? What if some of them described real journeys through actual places, hidden beneath the earth? In ancient Egypt, the Duat wasn't just a realm of the dead, it was a route. Described in incredible detail in the Duat, the book of what is in the underworld, it maps the nightly voyage of the sun god Ra through 12 caverns, guarded by serpents, monsters, and divine judges. These aren't abstract ideas, they're spatially arranged. The journey includes gates, watchers, lakes of fire, and even an inverted mountain. Some researchers now ask, was this a spiritual map or an echo of something real? Could certain temple complexes, like Abydos, Saqqara, or Dendera, have included subterranean chambers designed to simulate this passage? Ritual initiations held underground may have walked priests or royals through these sacred waypoints, a psychological death and rebirth, a rehearsal for eternity. Similarly, in ancient Greece, the Orphic mysteries describe the soul's descent into Hades, where it must choose between two paths, one of forgetfulness, one of memory. Gold tablets buried with the dead often included instructions like, turn left at the lake of Mnemosyne. Some of these tablets appear again and again, separated by centuries. This wasn't folklore, it was logistics, a guidebook for eternity. Now shift east. In India, the Pitter's Path, described in Vedic texts, is a spiritual highway, traversed after death by fire and light, marked by stars. In Zoroastrian cosmology, the soul crosses the Chinvat Bridge, which narrows or widens depending on one's deeds. Were these bridges real to the people, or were they allegories for internal, meditative experience, initiation into hidden knowledge? Even Mesoamerica echoes this belief. The Maya describe Xibalba, the place of fear, a vast underworld with rivers of blood and scorpions. The entrance? Often located in cave systems like the ones at Acton Tunishil Muknal in Belize. Here, archaeologists have found ceremonial paths, ritual offerings, and even human remains, suggesting these dark subterranean spaces were used to reenact the soul's journey. And in Peru, under the Inca capital of Cusco, legends speak of hidden tunnels leading to the Temple of the Sun. Spanish chroniclers wrote of soldiers who entered and never returned. Even today, restricted cave systems, like those near Sacsayhuaman, remain largely unexplored. In all these stories and places, one pattern repeats. The underworld is not simply death. It is a place of testing, of transformation, and to pass through it required knowledge, sometimes written on papyrus, sometimes tattooed on the bones of a priest, sometimes encoded in the architecture itself. But what's more haunting than the routes described are the routes lost. The books burned, the scrolls were destroyed, the tunnels collapsed. How many real-world underworlds are now buried, forever cut off from those who once walked them? As we approach the final chapters of this journey, we must ask, what did ancient people believe truly waited on the other side? Were their maps simply attempts to tame the terror of death? Or were they passed down from a deeper memory of an age when death wasn't the end but a journey home? In the next scene, we'll enter the realm of pure speculation and forbidden archaeology. Could these maps, rituals, and tunnels suggest contact with something non-human? Something remembered not just across cultures, but across epochs? Let's follow the final path into the unknowable. In the quiet echoes of the Earth's most ancient tombs, temples, and tunnels, a question whispers from the darkness. Were our ancestors alone in drawing these maps of the dead? Or were they following instructions from something else? Across the globe, stories emerge, some told in hushed voices, others hidden behind metaphor and myth, that hint at encounters with non-human intelligences. Figures descending from the sky, beings emerging from caves, entities encountered during near-death experiences or visionary rites. In many cases, these beings are not hostile, but guiding, illuminating, instructing. In the tribal lore of Australian Aboriginals, the Wandjina are ancestral spirits with large eyes and no mouths, said to have come from the sky to teach lore and song. Their depictions eerily resemble modern descriptions of greys. In Dogon traditions of Mali, sacred knowledge of the Sirius star system, unknown to modern astronomy until telescopes, was reportedly passed down by amphibious sky beings called the Nomo. But what does this have to do with underworld maps? In altered states, brought on by ritual, fasting, drumming, or psychedelics, shamans across cultures often report journeys underground, guided by glowing figures or light beings. These visions aren't random, they are structured, often geometric, often consistent. Some researchers now believe that archetypal landscapes seen in such states might be universal, that they're not imagined but accessed, like a program running beneath human consciousness. Could this explain the remarkable similarities between Egyptian, Sumerian, Mesoamerican, and even Polynesian underworlds? The repeating motifs of rivers, bridges, gates, and guardians. These aren't just symbolic structures, they're functional maps. They teach, they initiate. But who created them? One provocative theory suggests that these maps were seeded by a form of non-human intelligence, whether extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, or deeply buried in Earth's own ancient past. Perhaps a culture so advanced that it encoded its teachings in the most durable medium, ritual and myth. Consider, why would so many ancient societies invest immense resources into carving underground chambers, aligning them to stars, embedding acoustics that amplify chants and disorient the senses, unless they believed, no, knew, that the correct configuration of space, sound, and symbol could open gateways, not just to the mind, but to something other. Even Carl Jung speculated that the underworld archetype might point to collective unconscious truths, realities larger than the individual, glimpsed through myth. And modern physicists now propose that higher dimensions may exist, stacked like invisible layers within our own. If ancient rituals access those dimensions, even briefly, then perhaps the beings described were not hallucinations, but encounters. Of course, mainstream science rejects these ideas. Rightly so. The burden of proof is immense. But in the absence of proof, patterns remain, And patterns across cultures and continents, across epochs and empires, demand at least one thing: a second look. In our final scene, we'll ask the most human question of all: why did they do this? What drove prehistoric people to spend lifetimes carving maps of the dead? Was it fear, or love, control, or reverence? Or did they sense, as some do now, that death is not the end, but a journey requiring guidance, a passage best taken with a map, even if the map was whispered by stars? Let's walk the last path into the heart of mystery. In the end, the map of the dead might say more about the living. After all the chambers, tunnels, symbols, guardians, riddles, what remains? A pattern, a human fingerprint etched into time itself, a compass not just for the soul's departure, but for our own yearning to understand what lies beyond the veil. From the ice caves of prehistoric Europe to the fire-worshipping temples of Persia, from the pyramids of the Nile to the painted skulls of Mesoamerica, humans have always tried to orient themselves within the great unknown. The underworld in every form was never just a place, it was a path, a metaphor, a test, a reminder. To map death is to map meaning. It tells us what a people feared, what they hoped, how they imagined justice, memory, legacy. The rivers that souls must cross, the judges they must face, these are reflections of culture, yes, but also reflections of conscience. Consider the Egyptian duat, where the heart was weighed against a feather, or the Tibetan bardo, where consciousness must pass through terrifying illusions, or the Mayan Xibalba, where each level tested not just courage but cleverness. These maps do not merely guide the dead, they instruct the living. They ask, are you ready? But maybe there's more. Maybe the creation of these underworld maps was an act of hope. In a world where nothing was certain, where storms, droughts, disease, and war could strike without warning, these maps gave a sense of order, of continuity, of purpose, that even after all ends there is a way forward, that someone has walked the road before us, and that we can too. In this light, the prehistoric maps of the underworld are not signs of fear, but of astonishing optimism. To spend months, even years, carving tunnels that no one alive would live in, to inscribe stones that only the dead might read, is to say, we believe in something more, and that something more is not limited to the ancient past. In today's world, we no longer build tombs into cliffs or chart rivers of flame, but we still build cathedrals of memory. We map our lives into digital traces. We preserve our names in stone, data, photos, books. We still dream of guiding those we love even when we can no longer speak. In 1,000 ways, we are still drawing maps for the dead, or perhaps for ourselves. So, what do we do with this knowledge? Perhaps we listen more closely to the stories of old, not as superstition, not as fantasy, but as insight into our own nature, as clues to the great questions that still haunt us. Where do we go? Who waits for us? What remains when all else is gone? And perhaps, as we walk through life, we carry these ancient maps not as relics, but as reminders that every journey matters, that every choice echoes, that even in the dark there may be a path, and that it was traced long ago by hands not so different from our own. The map of the dead is not just a way through the afterlife. It's a mirror. It shows us where we're going, but more than that, it reminds us why we live. We began this journey asking a simple question. Did our prehistoric ancestors chart the underworld? An idea that sounds fantastical, mythic, even impossible. And yet, the deeper we ventured into the caves, chambers, and forgotten catacombs of early humanity, the more that question transformed. Because maybe it was never really about literal maps. Maybe it was about orientation, direction. A need to believe that even in death there is a route, there is a path. For the earliest humans, the world was full of mystery. Thunder was divine. The night sky, a sacred canopy. Death was not an ending, but a crossing. And every river, star, shadow, and echo became part of a larger design, a way to make sense of the incomprehensible. From Lascaux to Luxor, from Siberian burial circles to Filipino cave sanctuaries, we see it again and again. a universal urge to turn death into direction, to assign meaning where none is guaranteed, to draw a map where others see only darkness. And these weren't just funerary rites or superstitions, they were acts of faith in continuity, that the soul persists, that the ancestors watch, that the unknown is navigable if only we prepare and remember. In a sense, the ancient maps of the dead may be the first true human technology. Not spears, not fire, but narrative, pattern, storytelling that dared to reach past the final breath and speak to eternity. And that legacy is not dead. Even now, in a hyper-connected, data-driven world, we still build memorials, we still walk labyrinths of grief, we trace emotional maps when someone we love is lost. We hold vigils, light candles, write names on stone, on walls, in code. We still chart the void, hoping that meaning will rise to meet us, because no matter the age, the belief system, or the language, we all seek the same reassurance, that this life matters, that we are remembered, that someone has walked this way before, and that there is a way through the dark. So, what have we uncovered? Yes, ancient societies likely encoded symbolic directions for the soul in their tombs and temples. Yes, they charted stars that mirrored underworld beliefs. Yes, their burial grounds whisper of forgotten rituals designed not to mourn the dead, but to guide them. But we've also discovered something deeper, that the impulse to map the afterlife may be the most human instinct of all, not just to understand death, but to overcome it, to draw lines of light through the dark, to make the final journey navigable, and to find comfort in knowing that someone, somewhere, might one day follow the same path and be less afraid. So as this exploration comes to a close, maybe the real map is not carved in stone or painted on walls. Maybe the real map of the dead is the one etched in us, in our myths, in our questions, in our search. And maybe, just maybe, it leads us not just to an underworld, but to understanding what it truly means to be alive.